Hey everybody, welcome to the video and welcome back. We finally made it. NASCAR season is right around the corner with this expedition race in LA at the LA Coliseum. It's a short, flat track, quarter-mile in length. We're going to have cars zipping around the track very, very quickly. It's going to be a little interesting. I know there's been a lot of talk about whether this is a good idea or not, but I'm excited for it. It should be pretty fun. We got Pitbull, Ice Cube, some DJ playing in between cautions. Gonna be a little bit of a gimmick, but I'm here for it. It should be a fun time. But anyway, we're here talking some NASCAR DFS for the Busch Light Clash this weekend. This will take place on Sunday, February 6th at around 6 p.m. Eastern. But there's a lot more than just the race on Sunday. We have qualifying the day prior. We have heat races on Sunday evening leading up to the race on Sunday. So there's a lot to look forward to, but also a lot to break down as well. If you do end up finding this video helpful in any way possible, all I ask for you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. Something very small, but it can go a long way for the YouTube algo, so I really do appreciate that. And if you want to take that even further, become an official supporter over on Patreon. You had a few hundred people over there last year, and it's a very fun place. I think it's definitely the best NASCAR DFS community out there. Everyone is very great and nice, and it's a fun time. The Discord is popping 24/7, and there's a lot of extra content over there as well. And I have updated some stuff from the year prior. The optimizer did get some updates this season. It's fully accessible, 150 lineups, groups, randomness, export it right to DraftKings, and much more. Has my personal ownership projections over there, which I personally feel are the most accurate in the industry. And the prices are all pretty low compared to everybody else as well. So if you want to try it out this season, or even just this month, there's going to be a ton of content over there, including some written stuff and prize picks projections and amongst other things. I really do think you'll find it quite helpful this season. But besides telling you to follow me on Twitter and Instagram just for some extra updates or just seeing whatever I'm up to, I think it'll be up for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into the preview of this week's race. And as always, I gotta mention a few things before we get started. So first off, I finally got some stuff behind me, so it's not an empty room that you're looking at. I got Bristol up on the wall. I think that's a pretty sweet picture. I got Tony Stewart, Dale Jr., Ricky Rudd, and the Marines car and some other things behind me. And then lovely girlfriend walking the beaches of Florida. So we got that taken care of. If you have any other suggestions on what to put up there or whatever behind me, whether it be on the floor, on the wall, or whatever, let me know down in the comments. I'll be happy to consider it. And number two, probably the big news here is that if you saw my content schedule over on Twitter at Pennell16, I did mention a few things that I am doing with Osimo this year. I'll be writing a weekly article, maybe do some video on demands, and I'll be doing the live before lock live stream before every race. Now that does not mean I'm not going to be doing those things on my own. I'm still writing my own articles on Patreon. I'm still posting videos every single week, as you can tell as I'm here right now talking to you. And I'll still be doing my live streams. No live stream on my own channel for this week at the Clash, just because there's not enough time between like 4 and 6 to do 2 live streams and 2 breakdowns on Patreon and whatnot. So no live stream on my channel this week, but I will be doing a live before lock on Osimo's YouTube channel, I think around 5 p.m. up until 6 p.m. when the slate locks, if you want to check that out. Yes, I know I did have to leave them last year, but it was nothing personal, just some contract policy issues, but those have since changed. So I'm still able to do my independent work and do the work over on Osimo as well. So everything is all good there. But yeah, it's going to be a very fun season. I'm looking forward to it. We got practice and qualifying back for all the races this season, which is definitely a game changer. If you guys haven't been here since before COVID started, that was the usual back in the day. But ever since COVID started, you guys have been used to knowing the starting order pretty much as soon as the week started. DraftKings knew how to price guys based on where they're starting. We're not going to have that this year, so it's a whole different animal. I'm looking forward to going through the process with you all. But I think that's enough about me, so let's get right into the preview of this week's race. And as previously mentioned, this is the Busch Light Clash at the LA Memorial Coliseum. It's a quarter-mile short flat track. As you can see, there's like very, very minimal banking, and it's going to be a pretty interesting race. It's kind of like a mini Martinsville, and Martinsville is already completely tiny. And if you look at Bristol, that's a small track. Well, this track's about half the size as Bristol. Like, this is just a very small little, little racetrack here. So it's going to be interesting to see how the cars are going to be on it. Plus, we have the next-gen car, which I haven't even mentioned yet, which adds a whole new wrinkle into everything. We're in different horsepower now, different rules package, all that. So everything is changing, which is why I'm excited for it. This is going to be our first time seeing the cars in like an actual race altogether. We have 150 laps on tap, which means just over 100 Dominator points available to us. I think there's many strategies we can go this week. I'll talk about several as we go through the video here. But I do want to mention the on-track schedule for this week, because we are not going to know starting positions until a couple hours before lock. So you gotta stay tentative, which is why the live stream over on Awesimo's channel is probably pretty important, because you can ask me the questions that you probably have once we know starting orders, because I really can't talk too much about individual drivers and how much I like them or not without knowing their qualifying spots. And I should mention also, we only have around half the field that's actually going to make it, 23 cars instead of the usual close to 40. We're going to have 4 heat races. The top 4 in each heat race will end up advancing. Then we have several other last chance qualifying races. Kyle Larson's already locked in, so some guys are going to get knocked out of the race. The only guy that is completely locked in right now is Kyle Larson. Anybody else could end up being out. So there's definitely a lot of excitement to it. Now, if you're wondering how to approach this from a DFS perspective, like I said, there's multiple strategies. I know some people think this will end up being a wreck fest. This is our first time in the next gen cars. We're at a track that we've never been to. It's only a quarter mile in length. Keep in mind, it's not like the whole nearly 40 cars where it's like everyone's going to be on top of each other. It's still going to be everyone on top of each other. But we have half the field at half the size of like a Martinsville. So it kind of evens out in that regard. It's still going to be probably like bumper cars, but I don't think it's going to be a complete wreck fest like a Daytona or anything. I still think we should probably approach this from like a Martinsville standpoint in terms of building lineups. Now, there's not 500 laps. There's a fifth of that, just over 100. But I still think the guys up front are going to be picking up the fast laps and the laps led, and you're going to want those guys in your lineups. But if you're playing cash games, maybe you only go with 1 or 2 of those guys up front and the rest PD. But I think in tournaments, targeting guys up front, if the passing is going to be hard or not, that'll be more so telling in practice, which is being taken place after I record this video on Saturday, and it's only like 8-minute sessions. They're divided in groups, so we're not going to get a ton of information out of that. But at least we'll be able to see the cars on the track and see how the racing might somewhat look like. But in tournaments, I do like targeting these guys up front, because when I show you guys the salary page, this pricing is extremely soft. You can play whoever the heck you want. You can get easily like 5 dominators in your lineup depending on who makes the race or not. But just assuming a lot of those big names end up making it, I mean, you can pretty much make whatever you lineup you want. And it'll be interesting to see how the final positions are, but do not be afraid to target guys up front. I'm not fully convinced this will be a complete wreck fest. Now, I probably will build some lineups that are purely PD just in case, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly how this race is going to play out. We've never seen cars on this track before. It's an expedition race. It's just a clash, new next-gen cars. Anything could happen. I just have a hunch that I don't think it's going to be absolute chaos. I think they're going to be somewhat in order, but we'll have to see. That'll be all part of the fun this weekend. But I think it'll be about the preview. So let's dive right into the driver-by-driver breakdown portion of this week's video. And I already kind of gave my thoughts on the overall pricing on this slate. You can basically do whatever you want, which I think was probably the right move from DraftKings, because we have no idea where these guys are starting. We don't know who's actually going to be in the race besides Kyle Larson. We don't really know how this track is going to play out, who's going to be that good here. Now, I will say the tracks I'm comparing this most to are Martinsville and kind of Richmond. You can throw in all the short flat tracks, though, which is what I have done in projections this week. And if you look at the Vegas odds, they kind of correspond to what you'd expect out of a short flat track race. Like the 2 favorites, Martin Truex Jr., Denny Hamlet, that's what you'd see at a Martinsville race. You have Kyle Larson kind of like 4th or 5th right now, because you have the Truex Hamlin, they're both the same odds up top. You have Chase Elliott behind them. I believe Joey Logano is right up there with them. And then Ryan Blaney, I think, is below Kyle Larson. But it's kind of what you would expect. So Vegas is smart. So I think the smart way to go about it is treating it like more so maybe a smaller Martinsville race. And it won't be the exact same, but I think it will be somewhat similar to a degree. But let's start talking about these drivers. So we'll start with the upper tier guys, 9K and above. We'll start with Kyle Larson, $10,000, last year's champion. He absolutely crushed the field nearly every single race last year. It was absolutely phenomenal. We'll see if the Hendrick team can keep that up this year with the addition of the new car, and they're really cracking down on some rules. But he is the one guy right now that we have locked in. So we know for sure we can at least roster Kyle Larson. Nobody else we know of as of right now is going to be 100% in the race. Now, obviously, I think the majority of the race is going to be filled with drivers you would expect. I'd be very shocked if we don't see Hamlin, Truex, Elliott, those kind of guys end up making the race. But I will say, if we're viewing this as a typical short flat track weekend, so Martinsville, Richmond, New Hampshire, a little bit of Phoenix mixed in there, Kyle Larson's bread and butter is really not these track types. I mean, he's fine at them, obviously. We know last year he won at Phoenix for the championship, but this is currently the Martinsville past 6 races. Kyle Larson really isn't the best at Martinsville. I mean, 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, not really that many laps led or fast laps. If we're looking at the exact finishes last year, he had the short flats. Obviously, 1st in Phoenix with the championship, but then 14th at Martinsville, 6th at Richmond, 7th at New Hampshire, 18th at Richmond, and 5th at Martinsville. Like, these aren't bad numbers, but compared to some of the guys priced similar to him, he just isn't quite as good. I know Larson, I mean, if a lot of casuals are playing the Clash just because there's no football on, we have the Super Bowl the week after that. I mean, everyone knows who Kyle Larson is. He was the champion last year. I think he's going to have inflated ownership to start the season. And this might be a good race to be underweight on Larson. Now, again, we're going to have to wait on some other factors where these guys are starting or not, whatnot. But I do think Larson could be a good place to go underweight and get some leverage and get more exposure to the guys that have crushed these track types past couple of seasons, which has been Denny Hamlet, Martin Truex Jr., Chase Elliott. And as of right now, I would say those are the guys I'm looking to target the most. Like, these guys have absolutely crushed the short flat tracks. They had the 3 best odds in Vegas. Now, if we're just looking at last season, I mean, we could look at the past 6 races at Martinsville. I mean, Truex has been the man there. 3 wins the past 6 races. Hamlin's been good there. Elliott's been very strong there. But just looking at last season, the 7 races we had at short flats, Hamlin had the most DraftKings points per race, 87.1. Truex was second at 73.4. And Chase Elliott was third at 62.8. And these guys also led the most laps and had the most fast laps. I really think these are going to be the 3 guys to beat in this race. And if you're taking on a tournament strategy of rostering guys that are probably going to start close to the front, that can end up winning the race, pick up fast laps, and lead some laps, Elliott, Truex, and Hamlin, I think, are the 3 most likely candidates to do that. So I'm not going to break down each driver every single bit of their numbers, but I think those are the 3 to beat. Kyle Larson's right there with them, but he just hasn't been quite the guy at these track types that those 3 have been. And we'll see where they're starting. I mean, obviously, if some of these guys are in the back, I mean, some extra PD points, I don't really see that being the case, but we'll have to see what happens. But I do like those guys a lot. Kyle Busch, $9,000. We do have some practice, and I expect some big things out of Kyle Busch this year. Now, he was great last year. Definitely a little bit better than expected. A nice bounce-back season for Kyle Busch. But when Busch has practice, he is right up there with anybody. I don't think it'd be surprised to see Kyle Busch end up being not quite Kyle Larson level last year, but definitely being the driver to beat. I don't think anyone's going to do what Kyle Larson did last year for quite some time. We got to figure out these cars this year. But Kyle Busch should definitely be in for a pretty good season. He saw it at Martinsville. He was fine at the short flats last year. It wasn't anything incredible. I mean, 2nd at Martinsville, 9th at Richmond, crashed out in New Hampshire, 8th at Richmond, 10th at Martin. Like, it's fine. 7 races at short flats, though. It wasn't super impressive. 5 top 10s. He was good at getting good finishes, but he was just not leading laps or getting any fast laps. He was much better in the 550 package, but we can't even reference that anymore because that just no longer exists, which is unfortunate because I did like comparing how they performed in each package because it was quite telling every week. But Busch is fine. Again, just have to wait and see where these guys start. Logano is a guy you always want to target at short flat tracks. He's incredible at Martinsville. He's incredible at the short flats. Last year, kind of a rough ending, 11th and 10th, but 5th, 4th, 3rd, and 6th. And if you date that back to the 2020 season, the guy was getting a top 5 nearly each and every single time. So I think Logano, definitely a guy to be on our radars. Ryan Blaney kind of in a similar boat to Joey Logano. Ryan Blaney is excellent at Martinsville. I think this race could play out very similar to Martinsville. And if that's the case, Blaney's one of the best drivers there. He actually has the best average finish the past 6 races at Martinsville, 4 top 5, some of the most laps led in fast laps. And look, you don't really have to convince me to play much Ryan Blaney. I got the shirt on, had to break it out for the first race of the season. I'll play Ryan Blaney any chance I can get. And if we're at a short flat track, typically the Penske cars are your friends. William Byron, $8,300. He had 2 top 5 finishes in both Martinsville races last year. I don't think the Hendrick cars are going to have the advantage that they had last season, but they should still be considered top of the food chain as of right now until further notice. And I love Billy B. $8,300. Too cheap. I think he's firmly in play. Kevin Harvick, not a guy. If we're going to view this as kind of like a Martinsville, I am probably not that interested in Kevin Harvick. I realize he's cheap, but we saw a steep decline from him last season. Got a little bit better as the season progressed. Did have that one really strong race at New Hampshire and some other strong showings, the one at Bristol in the night race. But I'm not a big fan of Kevin Harvick here. Unless we have some PD upside, I just can't really see myself playing too much Kevin Harvick. I mean, past 6 races at Martinsville, 0 laps led. And if we're looking at his numbers at the short flats last year, like they were fine, but he just wasn't leading laps. Like 9.6 laps led per race and 15.4 fast laps. Like he wasn't terrible, but he didn't have a top 5 either. 5 top 10s. He was typically like a 6th to 9th place car, which that's okay, but it's not what I'm really looking for. Brad Keselowski, $7,800. I think he's going to be very interesting this year because we all know he's no longer with Team Penske. Took over Ryan Newman's cars, now part owner, Roush Fenway, Keselowski Racing. It's going to be interesting. I do think DraftKings did price him correctly. I thought at the beginning of the season, DraftKings would still price him around his teammates, Logano and Ryan Blaney. Looks like they're going to keep his price a little bit lower in this car, which is deservedly so. I mean, obviously the 6 car is not going to be as good as the 2 car. I mean, Keselowski is definitely a major upgrade over Ryan Newman. We know Keselowski is a phenomenal driver, and obviously being part owner, they're going to have some juice in that car, but it's not going to be the same kind of juice that they had in the 2 car with Penske. But we do know Keselowski is excellent at this track. 5 top 5s the past 6 races here, some of the most laps led per race. Excellent at short flat tracks. Keselowski is a guy that I think we should consider playing, although wait and see where he starts. Again, car downgrade. You're not going to expect numbers that he's had in seasons past because it's definitely a little bit of a worse car, but just had the ownership role now, but probably going to be a little bit of a hit to where he finishes in most weeks. Kurt Busch, $7,600 now in the 45 car. Moved on from the 1 car with Chip Ganassi now on 2311 with Denny Hamlet and Michael Jordan, now Bubba Wallace's teammate. I know Bubba Wallace did not have a great season last year, and I'm not going to put that on Kurt Busch for this season. I don't think they're going to run how Bubba Wallace did. I think Kurt Busch is a much better driver than Bubba. I don't think it's a hot take or anything. I think pretty much everybody could agree with me there, and I think he's going to have top 10 upside in most weeks. Kurt Busch is a great driver, and I think this 45 car is probably better than the 1 car that he had last year. So I think Kurt Busch is going to be a guy to attack early and often if DraftKings is going to keep his price a little bit low. If they think this is a bit of a downgrade for him just because of how Bubba performed in most races last year, but I don't really think that's going to be the case. But Kurt, he's fine at the short flat tracks, fine at Martinsville, typically a guy that can contend for top 10s. Do like with that price point. Alex Bowman, $7,400, actually was kind of surprisingly good at the short flats last year, better than I would have expected him to perform, and actually won the most recent race here at Martinsville and won that Richmond race as well. 2 tracks I'm definitely looking at for this weekend, so Bowman definitely on my radar. Austin Cindric, another guy in a different situation last year. We saw him in brief stints last season in a 33 car for Team Penske, now taking over Brad Keselowski's old car, the number 2 car. We know Cindric, very good. Dominated the Xfinity Series, and I definitely have some pretty high expectations for him heading into the season. I'm not saying he's going to take on the world by storm and dominate races and just win a bunch of races. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I definitely think he can be lined for some pretty strong showings. Did have a short flat track race last year, finished 20th at Richmond. Obviously not that impressive, but I think in the 2 car, he definitely has some upside this season. But as far as the clash goes, he's going to be one of those guys where we'll have to wait and see if he makes it in or where he starts for me to really talk about him too much. AJ Almandinger, $6,900, another new thing this year where he is fielding 2 full-time Cup cars this year. The 31 car with Justin Haley, and the 16 car is going to be a bit of a revolving door of drivers. And Gregson, we have AJ Almandinger, and the guy I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think these guys are going to be somewhat good this year. We know AJ Allmendinger's got the talent now. He's much more of a guy prefer road courses, but I still think depending on where he starts in this race, he would be somewhat interesting. Christopher Bell, I feel like he's going to end up being one of my favorite plays on this slate. We know Bell loves short flat tracks. That is where I was targeting Bell a lot last year. That and road courses were pretty kind to him. But just looking at Bell's numbers last year at the short flats, 9th at Phoenix, 17th at Martinsville. After that, or I guess technically before that, 3rd at Richmond, 2nd at New Hampshire, 4th at Richmond again, and 7th at Martinsville. Christopher Bell is a guy that I firmly have on my radar. My projected finish and projections, preliminary, just finding out where he just random qualifying spots. It's looking pretty good for me. And if you look at the 7 tracks and just once the averages are added up, 7.3 average finish, which is better than a lot of drivers that we talked about, 3 top 5s, 6 top 10s. Guy was phenomenal. So Bell, a guy I firmly have on my radar and might end up being one of my highest owned drivers, depending on how this slate works out. I'm not sure where he's going to start yet. I'm not sure what the ownership's going to look like, but I'm more than likely going to end up being overweight on Bell. Tyler Reddick, kind of in a similar boat where he's a guy that I'll probably end up being overweight on, depending on where he starts. I just think there's a lot of upside for him this year. I think the new car will play pretty well into his hands. So I do like Reddick a lot. I mean, wasn't great at the short flats last year. He was more of like a 1.5 mile track guy or other situations, but I still like Reddick a lot. I think it'd be interesting, but I prefer Bell probably. I mean, it depends where these guys start. It's kind of hard breaking this down, where the qualifying positions are, but those 2 are pretty interesting. Eric Almirola is another guy that I usually target at the short flat tracks. Is pretty good at Martinsville, just have 3 top 10s there the past 6 races. And if you're looking at his numbers at short flats, much better than what he was in the 550 package last season. 2 6th place finishes in a row at Phoenix and Martinsville, then 14th at Richmond. Then won the New Hampshire race, 6th at Richmond, and then 20th at Martinsville. And Almirola also had an average finish inside the top 10 and 4 top 10s in total last year at the short flat tracks in 7 races. Ross Chastain, another guy that performed pretty well at these track types last year. Had a 7th place finish at Richmond, 8th place finish at New Hampshire. He's another guy that's firmly on my radar. Again, just got to kind of cross your fingers that these guys end up making the race. Austin Dillon, $6,200, was kind of just solid everywhere last year. He finished inside the top 20 each and every single time, and 5 out of the 7 times he finished in the top 15 at the short flats last season. Bubba Wallace was actually pretty terrible at these track types. Wrecked out of the last race at Phoenix, on 25th at Martinsville, 32nd at Richmond. Just some pretty poor numbers all around, so I don't really have high expectations for him in this race if he ends up making it. Eric Jones was fine at these track types last year, and by fine I mean for his price point where he was starting. Did finish 8th in the most recent Martinsville race, but besides that, we're talking a guy that typically finishes around 18th to 22nd place, which is not very exciting. I mean, the price is fine, but I feel like we'll have better plays than Eric Jones on this slate. Daniel Suarez, kind of was very similar both to Eric Jones. I'm not going to go too in-depth there. Cole Custer was somewhat decent at these track types. They'd have a couple top 15s, but for the most part, like an 18th to 23rd place driver. So nothing too exciting there. Ricky Stenhouse is a guy that should flash some upside this season, and he's also the only car on this team now. So he has all the effort and concentration on his specific car because he doesn't have a teammate anymore. As Ryan Preece is no longer at the 37, so that could help him this year. $5,700, not bad if we have good PD. Harrison Burton, I think he's a downgraded version of MDB this year, so I don't have super high expectations, but the equipment is pretty decent for that price point of $5,600. Although we did see MDB put up some pretty bad races last year, and like I said, this is probably a downgrade from MDB, so expectations are kind of low for the rookie Harrison Burton this year. Corey LaJoie is a fine pump play if you need the salary. Chase Briscoe, a guy that does have top 15 upside, but again, can be a little bit more hit or miss in the Stewart Haas cars. Still have a pretty sour taste in my mouth, and I'm sure probably yours as well from last season. Justin Haley is interesting, though, because we know he's in a much better car this year, no longer with Spire, and the 31 car for a colleague, which is definitely going to have some extra juice in it. And he was actually putting up some okay numbers for the equipment that he had last season. We're talking close to top 25 finishes. Now in the 31 car, definitely think there's room for improvement, so I think Haley would be interesting if he happened to get in there. Ryan Preece, he's okay. He's okay at these track types, but again, we're getting to the slim pickings now of guys that can end up making the race. Chris Buescher is too cheap at $5,100. 4 top 15s the past 6 Martinsville races, and overall was pretty solid last year, and I typically prefer him at the larger tracks, but I mean, Buescher is fine, and Martinsville has been a fine track for him, so I do think he's someone we could target. And if you happen to go the Chris Buescher route, obviously if he's in play, you could easily fit in like Elliott, Hamlin, Truex together, maybe just grab a Christopher Bell, and I mean, you can make whatever you want if you end up using any of these 5K drivers. And this is probably where a lot of the PD would end up coming from, so I mean, whoever makes it in is a viable pump play. I don't really need to break down Michael McDowell, Todd Gilliland. He's in Fast Pasta's car this year, which has had some bad luck to it. So I'll be a little bit hesitant to playing the 38 car with Gilliland if you end up making it. But just know whoever makes it in, they're a decent pump play down here. Maybe they gain a couple spots if there's some wrecks and you just load up on the top. That could certainly be a very solid way to go. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So if you found it helpful in any way possible, entertaining, or whatever, I really do appreciate likes, comments, subscribing, turn on the notification bell. It all helps me out a ton. I really do appreciate it. And please consider supporting the content over on Patreon. If you enjoy the free content over on YouTube, I'm sure you like the extra content over there. Plus, I have my Discord community, which you can access me literally 24/7, maybe besides like 3 to 9 a.m. But besides that, I'm always on there, and it's a very fun place to be in. We're in there all the time discussing NASCAR DFS and pretty much anything else, and then the optimizer and all the extra content. So I do think you'll find it quite helpful. And don't forget to check out Prize Picks if you haven't already. I will be talking about Prize Picks more so this year. I really do enjoy playing over there, and their lines are very soft. And if you're a new signee over there, go to prizepicks.com, use the link down below. Make sure you use code CPEN. You get an instant deposit match bonus to whatever you deposit up to $100. So it's free money, so please try to take advantage of that. That's Chris Pennell16 on Twitter and CPEN16 over on IG. That's pretty much everything I had to say. I wish you all the best of luck. I'll see you on the Awesemo live before lock stream around 5 p.m. on Sunday. Until then, wish you all the best.